going to be a class session with our mesmerizing guest, Professor Dr. Edi Pratomo, SHMA. And today we are also going to talk about this very exciting topic, which is the Indonesian law of the sea that will be guided by our moderator, Dr. Adia Paramita Prabandari, SHMLEMH. But before that, I would like to introduce you guys and read the CV of Dr. Adia Paramita Prabandari. All right, so Dr. Adia actually obtained her bachelor's degree in Universitas Diponegoro and also obtained her master degree in Diponegoro University and University of Wisconsin, United States. And she is very exciting in her career as a lecturer in her field, which is an international law. And she is also currently a lecturer in Universitas Diponegoro. So without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Adia Paramita Prabandari. The screen is yours.
Okay, thank you, Denise, for the introduction. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Hello, Prof. Edi, and also Bu Laksmi. Okay, without further ado, I would like to start our session today. My name is Adia Paramita. Everyone usually call me Adia, and it's an honor for me to be your moderator at this summer course, Lex Proficia 2021. Okay, and in this afternoon session, we will have online course from His Excellency Ambassador Professor Dr. Edi Pratomo SHMA entitled The Legal Status of Treaty or International Agreement and Ratification in the Indonesia Practice within the framework of the development of the national legal system. I believe shall enrich our knowledge on this particular matter. Okay, due to the limit of time, I think Prof. Edi will have approximately 60 minutes, Prof, to deliver the speech, and then followed by a discussion session after the speech done. And for all the participants, if you want to ask questions, you can write it on the chat column. And don't forget to mention your name and also your origin of the study program. And before we start the lesson, I hope every participant can turn on the camera. I would like to see you guys. Please turn on your camera. Okay. Before the speech begin, allow me to briefly introduce the speaker, Professor Dr. Edi Pratomo SHMA, His Excellency Ambassador. Completed his Bachelor of Law at 17 Agustus University, Jakarta in 1981, then continued Master at St. John University, New York, USA, and graduated with a Master of Arts degree in 1889, sorry. He then completed his PhD at the Faculty of Law, Pajajaran University in 2011. Prof. Edi has had a long and great career, both as a diplomat and also as an academic. He is one of the great diplomats owned by Indonesia. His career in the international diplomacy includes as the Director for Economic Treaties and Socio-Cultural Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and then Deputy Chief of Mission, Indonesian Embassy in London, and also acting head of Indonesian Ambassador to London, then Director General for Legal Affairs and International Treaties, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and then he is also the Indonesian Ambassador to Germany in 2009 to 2013, Senior Advisor of Special Staff to the Speaker of the House of Representatives in 2014 and 2015, then Presidential Special Envoy on the delimitation on maritime boundaries between Indonesia and Malaysia in 2015 to 2018, Advisor to the Foreign Minister for the determination of Indonesian maritime boundaries in 2020-2024, and also advisor to the Minister of Marine Affairs and Fisheries on the eradication of illegal fishing in 2020 up till now. And in the academic area, he is a lecturer at the Faculty of Law, University of Diponegoro from 2016 until now. He is also head of Department of International Law in University of Pancasila from 2017. He is also head of Directorate of International Office, University of Pancasila from 2018 until now. And he is the Dean of the Faculty of Law, Universitas Pancasila, 2020 to 2024. He is also the head of Defense and Security and External Relations at the Indonesian Professors Association from 2020 to 2024, and also the member of the International Law Teachers Association 2017 up till now. Wow, Prof. Eddie is a very busy person. Okay, without any further ado, I would like to welcome Prof. Eddie. Prof. Eddie, the floor is yours.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much. Dear Mita,
Yes.
Vice Dean of the Faculty of Law, University Ponorogo, and the organizing committee of this very important gathering, international forum. I'm quite glad to be here, to be invited at this very special occasions to discuss about the legal political doctrine of the Indonesia's law, especially as is right at the constitutional that we adopted in 1945. I have already submitted my presentations. There are two presentations, but I would like to be assisted by moderator or master of ceremony so that we can go through the presentation that I have already prepared.
The Master of Ceremony will share the screen, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. The official.
The topic of our today's discussion is very much related to the questions whether Indonesia has political doctrines on the legal status of international instruments in the national legal system of Indonesia. I have, in fact, three questions. Can we proceed to the next presentation, please? Satu lagi. Well, as the introduction remarks, I think we fully understand that the globalization has changed everything in our life. And within the framework of international relations and bilateral, regional, and multilateral cooperation, there are many meetings between officials of certain governments. And we are quite aware of the existing international treaties among them, derived from the international communications and international meetings. And Indonesia has become party to several, almost many of the international conventions, international treaties that we have ratified. And the questions now is how do we implement them in our national legal system? Next, please. I have three questions, which is very important to share with all of you. Number one is the ununiformed understanding of the definitions of the international treaty. What is the definition of international treaty? In fact, public has different interpretations. And number two, what is the legal status of the international agreement or international treaty in our legal system in Indonesia? Is it having a same legal status as the national law, or do we need to ratify them first, then we implement it at international, at the national legal system? That's why number three, the question is, what is the concept of the ratifications in Indonesia? Next, the three questions I would like to try to explain. On the definitions of the international agreement or treaties, I think we have understand the articles that mentions by the Vienna Conventions on the Law of Treaties 1969 and 1966 and 1986. The definitions is very much clear. And we have also a definition of our national law on international treaty number 24 of 2000, which says about the definitions of the international agreements. Let us now see those articles which can clarify the understanding of the definition of the international treaty. Next. Before in the Orde Baru era, the new era, at the time, many agreements between private sectors has been considered as the international treaty. We understand at the time that PT Caltex is a company of a certain country. Caltech is owned by the United States, but Caltech is not subject of international law. And Caltex and PT Stanvac, PT Shell, those are not representing the governments, but they are representing the business people. But at that time in 1963, we have ratified those agreements with the ratification process, the approval of our parliaments. Because at that time, there is a distortive public understanding. They considers all cross-border agreements, both public and civil, between countries and multilateral companies as international agreements, often confuse the context of terminology or international treaty with international contracts. We are talking about two different animals, two different things. Number one is under the public international law, and the contract is in fact under the private international law. Number one is international treaties, and the second is international contract, which is under the regime of the private international law. Next, those are the ununified definitions of the international agreement or international treaties. Number two is what is the legal status and application of the treaty, international agreements in our national law in Indonesia. We have known the two systems, the two doctrine. Number one is doctrine of incorporations. We usually call it monist doctrine. And number two is transformation doctrine or dualism. So those two different regime is in fact implemented in Indonesia in a combination theory and system. Number one, we have a very clear example, the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, 1982, that we have already ratified with Undang-Undang or Act number 1785. But at the same time, we also initiate and adopted law on waters regarding Indonesian waters, law number 6, 1996, which is in fact the implementations of the law of the sea on the law number 17 and year 85. We call this as a dualism because we have already ratified the UNCLOS with law number 17, but subsequently we need to have another national law, which is the transformation of UNCLOS into the national law, into the law number 6, 1996, which we call it Indonesian waters. This time, Indonesia has adopted the doctrine of dualism. But if we see example number 2, Vienna Conventions of 1961 and 1963 on diplomatic and consular relations, we have also in 1982 ratified those two conventions, those two Vienna Conventions under the law number 1, 1982. We only ratify this with approval of the parliaments, and immediately the two conventions were implemented fully in Indonesia under the ratifications number 182. This is very much different with what we have done in number 1 with UNCLOS of 1982. Number 3 is Vienna Conventions of 1969. Yeah. The principles apply without ratification. This is also another monism regime that we are applying in Indonesia. So what is the conclusion? So the root of the problem, in fact, is there is no clarity doctrine in Indonesian law, whether we follow monisms or we follow dualisms or combinations. I would say that we follow combinations theory. Sometimes on a certain international treaty, we are applying monisms doctrine, and on certain questions, especially related to the convention, which is very important to our sovereignty or defense issues, we need and we have to have another national law, which we call it dualism. Now we'll try to this is the legal status and application of the international treaties or international instruments in our legal system of Indonesia. Next, I would like to try to explain about the concept of ratifications. We have two different perspectives, especially between constitutional law, hukum tata negara, and international law, hukum perjanjian internasional. We feel that the concept of ratification in Indonesia is something which is done in national law and then followed by the international procedure. What is internal procedure? What we mean with internal procedure in Indonesia within the framework of constitutional law? Number 1 is that the executive and legislative authority in making international agreements and legislating national legal products that ratified it. So first of all, where the government executive have signed the agreement with foreign partners, then the government, the executives, we call it the executive, they will inform and report to the parliaments. Parliament would like to then proceed with the decision to ratify the agreement that has just been made by the government. This is mandated by the Article 11 of the Indonesian Constitution 1945. Bahwa persetujuan untuk membuat perjanjian is with the consideration and approval of the parliament. President and executive may declare war and make treaty with other countries with the approval of the parliament. So that is ratification within the framework of internal constitutional law in Indonesia. We call it internal procedure. But ratification means also external procedure under the regime of international law, meaning that we need to present our consent to be bound with our partner in foreign countries. When we already signed the agreement, then we brought the agreement to the Parliament for ratification. Then the approval of Parliament subsequently has to be submitted to our partners in foreign countries. We informing them that we have already been gone through the internal legal requirements, namely the approval by the parliaments, and from that time, we need to have an exchange of notes to inform with the instrument of ratifications. So the instrument of ratification is a letter from the government addressed to foreign partner, the other party of the agreements. We submit these instruments, which is signed by foreign minister, that Indonesia is now concerned, is presenting the concern to be bound by the treaty. And the effective date of the agreement is then entry into force on that the day of the exchange of note. So ratifications has an internal process, at the same time is also having the external process. So first process is we need to have an agreement, undang-undang ratifikasi from the parliament. Then on the basis of this agreement with parliament, the executive then proceed to explain and to convey, to submit the instrument ratifications, informing the other party that Indonesia is now presenting the wish, the intentions, concern to be bound by the treaty. Next. So we have already discussed three questions. Number one is the definitions of the international treaty. Number two is the legal status of international instruments at the level of our national legal system. And we have already discussed the concept of ratification that I have already explained. We can continue with just go through with the next PowerPoint, please. I would like to now focus on the definitions of the international treaty. Next, please. Bisa maju ya. I'm trying to explain about the definitions. I have already explained number two, the legal status of the international treaty in Indonesia. We have monism and dualism doctrines. And number three is about the concept of ratification, which I have already said that the ratification having two different meanings. Number one is internal process, and the second is external process. Ya, terus next, go. Gak lambat ya. Hilang. Where is my screen? Gak ada? Atau tanpa screen aja?
Wait up.
Yeah. Once again, the issue is only three. Number one is how the national law defines international treaty. Yeah. Number two is how the status and application of the international treaties in the national legal system. And number three, I've just explained and discussed with all of you how the concept and meaning of the ratifications of the international treaty in our legal system. Next, the presentation is very clear, but I need only to try to underline the most salient points of my presentation. we can just go through this, the framework of the issue. I have different regulations and rules. You may read it very carefully at home, and I just skip this. We go to the next issue on the definitions. Yeah. Those are the legal basis regarding the international treaties and agreement with the national legal system. I was trying to explain, step by step that has been taken by the government, especially in cooperation with the member of parliament, Komisi 1, Komisi 1 parlemen. Ya, next. Agak lambat ya, Nita ya.
Betul, Prof.
Terus putus ini ya.
Slow, yeah.
Let me consult with my presentation, and here we go with the definition of the international treaty now. Number one, we would like to introduce to all of you the definition of the international treaty with regard to Article 2.1, Vienna Convention 1969. What is in fact international treaty? International treaty is an international agreement concluded between states in written form, governed by international law, whether embodied in a singular instrument or in two or more related instruments, and whatever its particular designation. The slide yang berikutnya, next slide. The title is the definition of international treaty. So we differentiate between international treaty and international contract because international treaty is under the international public law, while international contract is under the regime of international private law. We have also a definitions under the national law number 24, 2000. What is international treaty? International treaties are agreements in certain form and name which are regulated international law, which are made in writing and rise right and obligation in public. Yeah, this one. International treaties are agreements in a certain form and name it, which are regulated inside international law, which are made in writing and create obligations in public. So I need to turn off my video. Okay, continue with the next slide, please. Yeah, the implementation of the international law and international law has, sorry. I have already discussed this one, dualism and also monisms. I have already explained to you. So Indonesia needs to determine which doctrines or study should be adopted. Because sometimes, as I have just explained, that we are following the dualism, but in certain cases, we are also applying monism. The example were explained by myself now. And the questions of my presentation is that those three questions has to be responded by the determinations of our legal system. Because as we understood it, Article 11 of 1945 Constitution doesn't explain very clearly whether Indonesia is monism, whether Indonesia is dualism. If we compare to the other continental countries, in Europe, for example, United States or Australia, they have already decided the decision to apply a certain doctrine on monism or dualism. My experience when I was in Germany, I read the Constitution of Germany, especially Article number 25, that it stipulates 25 articles. International law is the law of the land. International law / international agreements, international instruments are the law of the land. That was said very clearly in the Constitution of the Republic of Germany. In Vietnam, in Australia, they have also very solid positions, doctrines of the legal status of international law within the domestic law, but not that in Indonesia. So we sometimes using monism and sometimes using dualism. What we are reading and the constitutions, especially Article 11, it says only that presidents with the approval of parliament declare war, declare peace and war, and make international treaties with other countries. Doesn't say anything about our doctrine. So at the end of the day, I think as an academician, I would like to suggest to the government that in the near future, we need to amend the law number 24, 2000 on international treaties to be amended and try to accommodate the concerns that we are discussing now. Especially, we need to have one final legal decision on our legal doctrine, whether we need to adopt political legal doctrine on monism or on dualism, or we will apply both with a certain criteria. That will be great. But certain academicians told me that we don't need to advise to the government and parliaments to amend the constitutions, because when we are amending the constitution, then the other party which has certain interest, they will also amend the other articles. So instead of amending the constitution, we better amend the undang-undang, the Act number 24, 2000, to try to accommodate the concerns of public discussion, especially whether Indonesia is monism or is dualism. That is, in fact, the concise presentations that I wanted to explain to all the participants, that now the agenda before us is whether or not we need to finalize the three questions that I have just mentioned. Number one is definitions of international treaty has to be very much confirmed, one solid definition. And number two is the legal status of the instrument, international instrument at the national level. Yeah? Whether the status of the instrument that has been already ratified, is it same level with undang-undang, with a national act, or is it at the same level with peraturan pemerintah, government regulations, or is it at the level of Kepres, presidential decrees? So what is the legal status of international treaties when it is adopted the national legislation? We need to treat these international treaties, has already been at the national level. We need to treat it as a law. That's why at the end of my presentation, my suggestion would be to give the status of the legal international instrument same as national legal system. And number three is concept of ratification. Ratification has two meanings, especially number one is internal procedure, and number two is external procedure. So between constitutional law and international law, they need to unite on the definition of ratification. So we will apply both. Number one is that we need to have an approval from the parliaments as an internal procedure with undang-undang ratifikasi. And number two, we need to submit the instrument of ratifications, informing the other party that Indonesia has adopted this international treaty at the national level, and Indonesia then consent to be bound with the treaty. So those three have been explained by myself, and I would like to discuss with the participant if there are any questions or response or comments. I would now give floor again to Mita. Please, Mita.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Edi, for the interesting explanation. Okay, dear participants, are you still there? If you have any question, please write it down in the chat column, or I will give opportunity to 3 people to raise hand and give the response online. Okay, any question? Or maybe you can share your country's methods on the ratification of international agreement. You can give response. Okay, we will wait for a while, Prof. Any question, guys? Any response?
Can I ask Dr. Adi?
Okay, Pak Pulung.
Okay, thank you. Hello, Prof. Edi. We met again in virtual. Yeah, Prof. Edi, I think first of all that I think it's a very comprehensive presentation in regarding about the topic about the international treaty law, especially in the national perspective. But in this context, I don't want to try to criticize, but I still have actually the basic question in regarding about the ratification itself, and also the issue of the international treaty from the perspective of Indonesia. Prof. Edi, actually that when we have river with the mechanism of the ratification, they mentioned about they have a two ratification, and also the style they also have a two style, which is the monism and also dualism. My first question actually, from both of the mechanism, actually, which the effective one? I mean, like which the which the successive, which the I mean, like from from the both of the mechanism, from this mechanism itself, I think which the better. I think I need to understand first, because I'm not international law lecturer in international treaty, so I need to understand first in regarding about this mechanism. And the second, when you just mentioned about in your journal, you mentioned about the problem of Indonesia toward about the international treaty. You submit your suggestion to make amendment or revise the Article 11 in our constitutional regulation, which is like UUD 45. Is it effective? Because when we just revise, I don't think so that this is the cutting the problem in the future, because since that we have the overlapping regulation in our country, so actually that we always overlapping by another regulation. So that's why that is it effective enough to just like make a final solution in such the issue in regarding about our perspective itself. And I think that's all. That's my question. So maybe you can respond. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Pulung. Prof. Edi, the time is yours.
Yes. The meaning of ratifications in Indonesia is only understood as internal procedure. Yeah. Public knows that ratification is the approval by the parliaments, yeah, to the agreements that has been signed by the government, by the executive. As simple as that. So when the government come to the parliament and present the agreement that has been signed by the government explains to the member of parliaments that we have already signed an agreement with Indonesia and Vietnam on the continental shelf boundary. Yeah. Then Parliament will initiate discussions substantively, and finally the Parliament will subsequently adopt it and decided that the agreement is now ratified by the parliaments with a special act number blah 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 blah, and this ratification act usually consists only 2 articles. First article is that Parliament setuju, agreed to this agreement that has been presented by the governments, and this ratification act is going to be entry into force after the adoption of this decision in Parliament. Those 2 articles meaning that Indonesia has ratified the international instruments. But under the perspective of international law, we have not yet been committed to implement the international obligations, to implement the international treaty or bilateral agreements, because we still need to inform with our counterpart. And under this example, we need to inform the government of Vietnam that Indonesia has ratified internally with parliaments. The Parliament of Indonesia has agreed to this agreement, bilateral agreement between Indonesia and Vietnam. And now I am going to present the instrument of ratification as the external procedure to the government of Vietnam that we have already fulfilled our national legal requirements. And then both of them, between the representative of Indonesia and Vietnam, at the meeting on the exchange of that instrument of ratifications, from that date, that both countries have committed to implement and to enter into force of this agreement between Vietnam and Malaysia and Indonesia. So the ratification has two meanings, internal and external procedures. But for hukum tata negara, mahasiswa of the constitutional law, students of constitutional law, they know only internal procedure. But for HI mahasiswa, for students of international law, what they meant by ratification is consisting of two procedures, internal and external. So we need to combine between constitutional law students and international students to understand both. That we get to the ratifications. And on the amendments of Article 11, I have once proposed to Professor Mahfud MD when he was chairman of the Teacher Association on Constitutional Law. I have proposed that Indonesia need to have a political doctrine on whether Indonesia is holding monism or dualism, because we are in an ambiguous position right now. He said that we don't need PID to amend the Constitution, especially Article 11. Why we don't need it to amend? Because when we are amending the Article 11, then the other parties, the other interested group, will also propose to amend another article on DPD, another article on pemilu, another articles on sidang istimewa, and many other ideas. So it's better to revise and give a special attentions under certain article 10 or Article 11 of the Undang-Undang Number 24 2000 on international treaties. We better amend the Undang-Undang, regular Undang-Undang rather than Undang-Undang Dasar, because it's very sensitive, like Pandora box. When you open Article 11, then the other party will open another article. Then will be series of amendment to the constitutional law. Why I propose to amend? Because Indonesia has no legal doctrine, especially with regard to the international law. As I said, in Germany, they have, in their constitution, they have very clear article under Article 25 of the Bundestag Act. Article 25 stipulates that international law and international treaties are the law of the land. So when the government of Germany signed the treaty with Indonesia, for example, then at that time, the government and the peoples of Germany are committed to implement, having the legal obligation to implement the treaties, because the treaty that has already been signed by both government of Indonesia and Germany is also having legal binding position with all the people of Germany. So they don't need to ratify again in Parliament, because it is said already in the constitutions that international law or international treaties are the law of the land. So they don't have any ratification process for those who are having the monist doctrine. For us, we still have to go through with ratification process in Parliament, and we need to give another step to submit instrument ratification to the other party. Those two are very important, Mas Pulung, so that we have a very firm position on behalf of the government of Indonesia. And the Act number 24, 2000 is quite long time already, and we need to update now to be consistent with the international development. because it has already been 20 years ago, 2000, not 21. So we need to accommodate with the development of the domestic relations, international and domestic relations. Now, between international law and national law are the two laws which are complementary. So no one is under the other and above the other, but both are complementary, interdependent, and interrelated. So we cannot just having proud of having national law because we are living in a international law. We are living in a global world. So we have to uphold international law within our national legal system. Now many international laws already become an international customary law. So it's automatically implemented in Indonesia. So this is a discussion to have some comment and some input so that we are rich to have so many proposals and suggestions from the floor, especially from this very forum. This is young forum, young smart forum, which is quite important to discuss something which is very important for the position of the Indonesian government. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Edi. Pak Pulung, is there any response to the explanation?
Can I follow up the question,
Okay.
Dr. Adi?
Okay.
Okay, Prof. Edi, since that you are to be our representative, I mean to be in the representative of Indonesia in so many international forum or negotiations. So I still want to respond in regarding which the better in regarding about half the style, monism or dualism. Because if we can look our neighboring like Australia, Malaysia, Singapore, and also maybe United Kingdom, they are very consistently say that I am dualism. But Indonesia is always overlapping between, they have inconsistently to choose dualism and monism. And this is in fact, it happened when Indonesia want to try implement international treaty in our society. That's why that they sometimes have maybe have the problem between parliamentary and also the president to to take the throne. Who's the legalized one, the presidential or the parliament or House of Representatives, which is parliamentary. So sometimes that we have the conflict of interest between maybe we can call civil war to try to which one to legalize this international treaty. So I think this is my final response to you, Professor. Thank you very much.
Yes, once Professor Muhtar Kusumatmaja, late Kusumatmaja, was proposing to the government that Indonesia should hold the monism primat hukum internasional. Yeah, because we are part of the international community and many international agreements are made with the full participation of Indonesian view. We are quite active in initiating and in participating in many different law-making treaties at the international level, regional or multilateral. So when that treaty, that agreement has been signed, and Indonesia was also part of the initiator, it would be better if we don't have any difficulties in accepting this as our national law too. Because why, when we are negotiating in the United Nations system, like on the law of the sea, we have been participating from the very beginning, 1958, until the adoptions in 1982. And we are still questioned by the parliament to ratify and to make another law on perairan Indonesia. Why don't we just adopt it, that UNCLOS, as our national law? We are very clear. And Pak Muhtar was proposing that we are following monism primat international because international law is also law of the land. But till today, we are still discussing these questions. We haven't yet achieved a concrete decision. And my suggestions as an academician was in 2011 that we need to hold two approaches. Number one, we will have a monism doctrine when this agreement is relating to the sovereignty of the state, wilayah, defense, climate change, human rights, and environment. We need to have a monism. And for those agreements which are not create obligation to the peoples, maybe we just can have it perpres or peraturan pemerintah is in. But for those agreements which are very vital to Indonesia's sovereignty, we need to have a dualism, not monism, dualism. Monism only for agreements which consist of giving a special rights and obligation to the people. But for the certain issues like pinjaman, and then climate change, environment, human rights, and sovereignty, we need to have an approval with the parliament. Yes, Meta.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Edi, for the clearly explanation, and also Pak Pulung for the question. Okay, we move to the next question from Shaswan from the National University of Malaysia. I will read it for you, Prof. Greeting, Prof. Edi. I am Shaswan from UKM. I would like to ask on how Indonesian government's enforcement on the trespassing of the sea border issue. And then the second is, what is the example of implementation of international treaty into Indonesian local law? Thank you, Prof.
On the trespassing issue, especially on the disputed areas between Indonesia and Malaysia, which is happening many times, we have maritime border between Indonesia and Malaysia, especially along those line of Malacca Strait. We have also part of Natuna Utara, northern part of Natuna, which is bordering with Malaysia on the east and also on the west. We have already signed and ratified the agreement on continental shelf with Malaysia and Indonesia, but not yet having an agreement on economic exclusive zone. We are still discussing and negotiating with Malaysia for over almost 20 years. We have not yet achieved anything on exclusive economic zones. So we are claiming a certain areas of economic zone. At the same time, Malaysia is also claiming certain areas on exclusive economic zone. Those two claims are overlapping. So when our kapal, our ships are trying to fish in our claim areas, we consider that this claim area is Indonesia's water. At the same time, Malaysia, when they are fishing on their claims areas, they consider as their waters. But in fact, under international law, these are considered as overlapping areas or disputed areas. That's why we are trying to uphold our rule and regulations. To achieve a compromise solutions, usually we suggest that within the overlapping claim, we need to have a provisional arrangement agreement. We have already made an agreement with Malaysia on provisional arrangement, we call it. Under this provisional arrangement, we appeal for the Malaysian and for Indonesian nelayan, seafarers, not to have fishing activities in these areas in order to avoid unnecessary actions by the law enforcement of both sides. So provisional arrangements is a good solution so that both countries, both parties need to uphold with their positions, but not entering the very sensitive areas that we call disputed areas or overlapping. That was some of the suggestions of the two delegations, and we are upholding with this principle, and we are having at the same time negotiation going on. But sometimes there are certain seafarers, certain people who are trying to use this situation to get something for their personal benefit. That is something which is very sadly I have to say. But in the future, I think that Indonesia and Malaysia will finally settle the exclusive economic zones border agreement, because we have been having agreement on continental shelf since long time ago, 1969 already. And now is the time to finalize the agreement on exclusive economic zone. Thank you, colleague from Malaysia.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Okay, the next question is going to be McKelly from University of Canberra. Okay, you can turn on your mic.
Hi, I'm Meg. I'm from the University of Canberra in Australia. In Australia, there are multiple levels of law we have to take into consideration: federal, state and territory, Commonwealth and international. In this, the laws from one state or territory don't actually apply to the other ones, but the federal or national law applies to all of them. I'm not super knowledgeable on Indonesia or Indonesian law, so correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I know, you guys have provinces. I wanted to know if Indonesia is similar to Australia in that there are laws instated by the provinces as well as at a national level. And if yes, does this affect the relationship between Indonesia's national law and international law that you were talking about earlier?
Okay, thank you, Meg. Prof. Edi?
Yes, we are not federal system of governments, but we have a provinces. We have 34 provinces in Indonesia. We have one united law, national law. We call Indonesian National Unitary State, NKRI, but consisting of so different ethnics, different religion, different languages, different traditions, but we are united in Bhinneka Tunggal Ika, different but one but different. This is the very political ideology that we hold since the independence in 1945. With regard to the relations with international community, the provinces can do it directly, but they need to have consultations with the central government on foreign relations. But on investments and on cooperations, on sister city cooperations and on tourism cooperation, they may directly do the relationship with the other countries. But this cooperation has to be governed by Indonesia's national law when it comes to the investment and tourism. But the obligations of the national obligations to the international law is also an obligation of the peoples of Indonesia, be they the provinces or be they in the central governments. We do not have any problem or pending issues, especially with Australia on the law of the sea. We have already finalized our maritime border with Australia since 1997. Now we have only one pending issues, namely the 3 junction points between Timor-Leste, Australia, and Indonesia. And this will be settled in a very near future in this government. So in relation to the international law, I think Indonesia is very active. We have been making many initiatives at the international level, especially to draft the international standards of law using the international law commissions. It was Professor Mukhtar at that time was member of the International Law Commission, a very prestigious commission within the United Nations who are creating international law. And because we are participating in this lawmaking, then Indonesia need to commit itself to implement at the national level. Thank you from Canberra. You are 4 hours ahead, yeah? Already in the evening now.
3 hours.
3 hours.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Prof. Thank you, Meg. Next question. We have some questions still to be read from Nick, Queen Mary University. Good day, Professor. If we are talking about the sea border, it will always relate it with the state border issue, which has a lot of trafficking problem. Do you think that this trafficking issue is very related with the sea border issue? Secondly, we know that the position of Indonesia is quite important for the refugee who wanted to cross to Australia. Does this matter can also be a sea border issue which needs to be solved by the Indonesian government? And the third question, Prof. Also, since you are former of Indonesian ambassador to Germany, in your opinion, do you think that Germany should ban the refugee, for example, Middle East refugee, or they should accept it anyway? Thank you.
Yes, the position of Germany and Australia are the same. Those two are developed countries, so they are usually acting as the third resettlement countries. Indonesia's position is very strategic. The location geographically is, between Australia and South Asia. There are many trafficking. There are many people smuggling, illegal trafficking of human. But very fortunate, we have a very special forum with Australia. We call it Bali process. Bali process is a process which discuss and initiate the solutions to the problem of refugees from Rohingya, Myanmar, refugees from Bangladesh, from Sri Lanka. Their destinations, in fact, is Australia, but they are using the transit country, Indonesia, as a transit. So we do not want to push them to Australia, but we will process them in cooperation with Australia in order to invite also the UNHCR, United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, to participate in the determination process. For those who are considered as refugees, then they are having eligibility to be posted in third countries, in developed countries, including Germany. But for those who are not considered as refugees by UNHCR, then they have to go back to their country of origin under the ODP program, Orderly Departure Program, voluntary repatriation. But now sometimes it's very difficult because they want to stay in Indonesia, in transit country. And it's very difficult for Indonesia because Indonesia is not only having economic problems for the people of Indonesia, but Indonesia has not also ratified the refugee conventions. But even though without ratification, Indonesia is mandated by our constitutions that Indonesia is holding a very humanitarian views to assist other countries and to assist a human being to be treated equally, be they refugees or they are normal people. So Indonesia is very generous, and we have a very long history with Vietnam. On Pulau Galang, 1979, when Indonesia was hosting 2,000 more of Vietnamese refugees. But unfortunately now it's already been closed, and Pulau Galang has already been considered and determined as kawasan ekonomi khusus, special economic zone now in Pulau Galang. But we have still many refugees who are trying to depart to another country. And we are still talking with a country of origin and a country of destination. We need to have collect suggestion and collect decision between country of origin, transit country, and country of destination. Those three elements are very important, and we need to invite also the UN office in Jakarta for refugees to assist us, Indonesia as a transit country. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Edi. This one is, I think, the last question from Shahira, first-year student in Teros University. She said that she is interested in international law, so what advices or tips can you give as someone with a very skilled and knowledgeable background experience? Thank you.
Sorry, I cannot catch the
Okay.
Is that the questions or
She is
comments?
asking advices or tips from you, Prof, as a very experienced person in international law.
Oh, Safira need my advice.
Yes.
Why don't she come to Jakarta for advice? Or to go to Semarang, to Undip campus. Then we'll meet us, three of us. Mita, Pulong, and myself.
Yes, I think you guys can come to, if it's not because of this pandemic, I think we will meet in person in Semarang.
But international law is now become a very important law, because without international law, I think the world will have many difficulties. Now the question is the access to vaccine, especially for developing countries. Many countries are now debating about the access and also the price of the vaccine. So if we don't have any rule and regulations, then the strong country, then we will win the competitions. And we have nothing to vaccine with our peoples. Very fortunate that we have international law, we have international contract, rule and law, international law has been applied very consequently. That's why now we have the balanced approach between developed and developing countries in having an access to the vaccine. The people of the world, not only Indonesia, but also in any part of the world. We need to be vaccinated because Indonesia and other peoples of other countries are also need to stay healthy. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Prof. One more question, Prof. This is
Please.
the last. I promised you this is the last. Okay, greeting, Prof. I am Danish from UKM. I want to ask your opinion on court stances regarding international instruments. Does it have real influence, or it was just given credence but no real influence? Thank you.
International law having a very, very strong influence in Indonesia, especially the law of treaties, 1969, and on the Vienna Conventions on diplomatic relations and consular relations, we treat diplomats around the world on the same level because we are having an international regulations as stipulated in the conventions. And now international law in the legal system of Indonesia nationally has been one step treated very eloquently, because now we have also what we call it constitutional court, which is playing very good role, like what we have in Germany, Mahkamah Konstitusi, and the Council Court in Indonesia is also upholding the very principle of international law. We still remember the judicial review at the court by certain NGOs on the question of Piagam ASEAN, ASEAN Charter. It was submitted through the judicial review at the Council Court. This is the first time that international treaty is discussed within the Constitutional Court of Indonesia, meaning that we are now aware very much that the role of international law is very much increasing.
Okay. Thank you, Prof. Edi. Very well, fellow students and ladies and gentlemen. I think before we end today's summer course session, we would like to ask Prof. Edi to give closing statement, Prof. 5 minutes.
Well, thank you very much once again for the Lex Proficia, Universitas Diponegoro Faculty of Law, for initiating these very important occasions. The digitalization of law in Indonesia is now very much important issue. Everything is digitalized. Everything is digitalizations. So law is also very much relevant to be digitalized in the modern era and in the revolution era 4.0, 5.0, 101, and etc. Now for the law students, I'm international law lecturers, so I would like to advise that in Indonesia, we need more and more international law experts, because we are living in a one village, global village, in the globalization era. So not only study the criminal law and private law, business law, but more also you need to understand, to study more about international law, because knowing international law and understanding international law, you will understand the international community. International community is us, and we are also member of international community. At the same time, we are also member of the International Law Association and International Law Community. I thank you very much for this opportunity. Congratulations. Good luck, Mita, and all the best.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Edi. Finally, we come to the end of the session. I would like to say thank you again to Prof. Edi Pratomo for the insightful speech, and also to the audience for your active participation. We will meet again tomorrow morning in the next session. Thank you for your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Back to the Master of Ceremony, Danis.
All right, thank you so much, Prof. Edi and Dr. Adia. That was very insightful. And now that our session for the class is almost over, I would like to invite everyone to turn on your camera, because we're going to have another photo section for the documentation. So please, everyone, you guys can turn on your camera. So yeah. For those who aren't able to open your camera, it's fine. But for those of you who are actually fine for turning on your camera, please do so. Right. It's better. Okay. Wait, I'll wait. We'll wait for everyone. Okay, on my sign. All right. 3, 2, 1. Okay, one more time. 3, 2, 1. Okay, last one, I promise. 3, 2, 1. Okay, thank you, everyone. Now, I would like to remind all of you that do not forget that you guys will have to come to the Zoom meeting again tomorrow at 10
Thank you,
a.m.
Mbak Lasmi. Sampai ketemu, Mbak Lasmi.
Local Semarang time. And okay, finally, we're on the end of today's session. And it has been a great and wonderful day with every one of you. As the master of ceremony, I would like to apologize if there's any mistake of anything that I do that might offend you. So, from the bottom of my heart, I apologize. Now, because we start today's event with a prayer, I would like for all of us to close this event as well with a prayer. And the prayer begins. Right. Amen. Thank you, everyone. I guess, yeah, that's all for today. Good afternoon and see you guys on another session. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Shalom. Om Santi Santi Om Namo Buddhaya. Salam kebajikan. Goodbye, everyone.
See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.